right. Well, thank you to everyone for joining us today. This is Talk with Doc, and today we are going to be talking on finding your joy on your parenting journey. And it's my honor to have Dr. Bergina with us. Bergina Isbell is a psychiatrist, noted psychiatrist. She's an author as well of Victory Over Depression with and Without Medicines, as well as Come to the Table, a special needs devotional. She's a national speaker, goes all over the country speaking and sharing. She's a board certified psychiatrist, and then also provides mental health coaching through Growing in Grace Life Coaching. She's also the founder of Led Life LLC, which is a mental health consulting practice. And on top of it, she fully understands what we're going through as a parent of children with special needs as well. So lives it and breathes it. So we want to welcome Dr. Bergina with us today. Before we get into everything, just want to let our attendees know, both on Facebook as well as those attending the webinar with us. On the webinar, if you got any questions, you can go ahead and put those in the chat or on the Q&A. And those on Facebook, go ahead, post your questions in the comments, and we'll be following those as we go. But Dr. Bergina, thank you so much for joining us, and it's our honor to have you with us today.
Thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to share.
Yeah. So, we talked a little bit the other day, and, right now, it's just such a strained time, parenting. And first off, it's always hard to be a parent of a child with a disability in the first place. That stress is always high. But now, it's just even harder. And it's hard for us to find our joy sometimes when we're sitting here with being stay-at-home orders and having all these issues going on. So excited to have you share, just how, as parents, how can we go about finding our joy on our parenting journey again, and not be just so frustrated and always, down with that. We need to find hope, and as I always share, my key word in life is perspective. We've got to change our perspective and find the positive that is happening. And so, love to hear what you have to share with us.
And we're going to talk about that. I'm glad you mentioned that word, perspective. You're a nice plant. We talked a little bit about what we were going to share today, but we didn't go into perspective, but I'm definitely going to go into that today. And, and I will say, we're definitely going to go through the process of how to do this, but I believe that the Bible is exactly what it says it is. It's basic instructions before leaving earth. And it does tell us how to have joy. We know that our ultimate joy, it's not a feeling based on a circumstance. It's just this innate thing that we're given. It's one of the fruits of the Spirit that we're given, that we're blessed with. But there are times that we can forget that we have that, and we need some reminders of it. So if I had to retitle this or add to it, yes, I do believe it's one way of saying how to find joy in the journey. But the other way is how to rekindle, or how to be reminded. As the word reminds us, it tells us, renew your mind. And sometimes we have to remind ourselves about the things that we already have, because as you said, when we're in the middle of the moment, when our kids are doing things, it can try us, and we can forget.
Yes. Very quickly. Yes. Yeah. So I know you've got some slides and PowerPoint can go through. You want to go ahead and share that on the screen with us?
Absolutely. And hopefully you can see this. I'm not quite sure if you can see everything the same way that I can, but let's see. Okay. So far,
Perfect.
so good?
Yep. We're with you.
Okay. All right. So in the next few moments, what I'm going to do is give you about 5 points that I use literally on probably, if not an everyday basis, at least every week, to help myself, to help my clients, because I do have a fair number of special needs clients. And I also go on a fair amount of speaking engagements to churches, and to other organizations. Some of them are not faith-based organizations, and share information that's very similar to what I'm going to share today. So this is tried and true. This is like battle tested, war tested techniques that I'm going to be talking to you about. And they don't just work in parenting. I find that these things work in life as well. But I notice that I get the extra joy of being able to apply them the most in my parenting journey. Now, I will tell you, yeah, I'm a psychiatrist, and yes, I think that for those reasons that you already mentioned, that I probably have some good information to share, but I know that I'm not the only person that's sharing information. And even now, just thinking about coronavirus, one day we get one piece of information, the next day we get another piece of information. Well, no, don't do this. Well, no, do that. This is going to work. No, that's going to work. It can be very confusing. And I know as a parent, I get confused, but even just as a person, it can be confusing to hear so much information. And sometimes it just kind of feels like noise. And so again, I just want to remind you that a lot of these principles, a lot of this information, I go back to the Bible because I feel like that doesn't change. I feel like that information is going to help us in our process. And at the end of the day, what we want is growth. At the end of the day, we want ourselves to grow in our faith. We want to grow as parents. We want to grow as leaders. We want our children to grow. But just as I said earlier when we were offline, my family and I, we have a little garden. And one thing that we've been doing is we take pictures every day. And we notice over time that if we're patient, we start to see little principles, line by line, precept by precept, that leads us to grow. So it does not happen overnight. There's some things that we're going to talk about that if you try it just one time or just observe one data point, it may not be helpful. But if you're looking at it in the long term, in the trajectory, I think these things can be helpful both in the moment, but also in the long term. And I tried to break it down to just 5 points because I think if we have too many, then we forget. The human brain likes 3s and 5s for some strange reason. So that's why I kind of put it into 5 points. Plus, you've got 5 fingers and you can kind of remember them on your hand. But the first of those is that it really is all about mindset. I think that I'm in a parenting group for parents of children with special needs. And I know there's one particular person that no matter what feedback we give or what feedback is given from the participants or from the other therapists or the leaders, a lot of times he'll come back and he'll say, well, I see what you're saying, but I've just got to wrap my mind around that. I can't quite receive everything that you're telling me right now and truly get an understanding of it right now because I just can't wrap my mind around what you're saying. What you're saying sounds true, but I'm just telling you, I need some time to kind of get it. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I just want to remind you that it really is about your mindset. And I think that's one of the principal things that we have to get. And again, we're going to hear information from a lot of different places. You're going to get knowledge about what you should do with your kids, what you should feed your kids. Is there a cure? My kids both have diagnosis of autism. Is there a cure for autism? Well, you should have your kid in this and you have your kid in that. And it's a lot of well-meaning information and well-meaning advice from a variety of different people. But I remind myself that no matter how many data points I'm going to get, no matter how many times information is going to shift, I love that quote that says, in God we trust, all others bring data. A lot of data is going to be given to you, but I try to go back and make sure that my mind is set on the main thing. And for me, one example of a main thing is I set my mind on things that are above. I think I wanted to say that's Colossians 3, maybe. That reminds us to set our minds on things that are above. When I keep an eternal perspective as my main guiding data point, it makes things so much easier. I remember my daughter was a toddler and we had no idea. My daughter was not diagnosed with autism until she was about 10 years old. In a sibling study, my son was diagnosed at 3, but my daughter wasn't diagnosed until 10 because as a female, sometimes the signs are a bit different. And I happened to go to a teaching about that at a autism conference. I was speaking, but before I was speaking, there was another speaker and I went to listen to her. And she was sharing about the fact that our daughters are sometimes underdiagnosed. And I remember thinking back to the fact that I saw all these little signs when she was younger and when she was little. But I remember my grandmother saying to me, pulling me aside, and she says, you know what? You're having a really hard time with her. And I can tell that she's a special child. But I want you to remember that, babies won't be babies always. And there's going to come a time where her behavior and what's going on with her over time, you're going to figure it out. And you're not going to know it all at one time, but you'll eventually figure it out. And that, again, that perspective, that long-term perspective, it may be hard to keep the eternal perspective, but sometimes just, again, keeping that long-term perspective and setting our minds back on that can be very, very helpful, especially if you're in the middle of one of the stories that I'm going to share a little bit later, a practical example. The second point is that it starts on the inside and it works its way out. And that is true for just about everything. Again, when we're thinking about our illnesses, they start inside and then they kind of manifest themselves out. You have a virus or an illness. Let's just think about the common cold. You get sick with that. You get this illness. The little germs are on the inside of you. And then they multiply. And then the next thing you know, you start having what? Symptoms of the illness. You may have a cough or a cold, or you may have a fever, or you may feel sick to your stomach, or you may get food poisoning. You had that Chinese food and you decided that you wanted to try it again the next day, but you forgot to put it in the refrigerator. And then you get sick to your stomach. It started on the inside and then it's going to work its way out. Thank God it works its way out. But as it's working its way out, that can be a little frustrating. And I put this up here and it's a very busy slide, but this was something that really helped me when I was thinking about autism with my kids, because I saw behaviors. I saw the external manifestation of what was going on the inside. I saw my son biting his wrist. I saw him biting his shirt to the point where he would have to change shirts multiple times a day. And I would just say, stop biting your shirt, stop biting your wrist, stop biting your shirt, stop biting your wrist. And then I thought about it and I said, well, wait a minute. Why is he biting his shirt? Why is he biting his wrist? There's something going on the inside of him that's being manifested on the outside, and we have to figure that out. And what it was for him was anxiety. We realized later on that anxiety and autism run hand in hand. Anxiety and ADHD also run hand in hand. Something about those A's. But it turned out that he was very anxious, and a fair number of kids with autism also have anxiety. And because he has intellectual delay, some intellectual disability, and he's mostly nonverbal, he couldn't tell us, well, Mom, that makes me nervous. And because I'm nervous, I'm biting my wrist. So I had to kind of look at other cues. I tell people behavior is speaking, but are you listening? You have to learn to listen to what your child's behavior is saying. And not just your child. I have folks who have spouses with autism, or other family members with a variety of different abilities or differences in terms of their intellectual capacity or their physical capacity. And regardless of what it is that they are saying outside of their mouths, a lot of times I still will track back, even if they're highly verbal people, I will still track back to look at what their behavior is doing. Because again, it's kind of starting on the inside and then it's just kind of coming out of the mouth, right? Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So you may have to take a step back when you see a problem behavior, or when you see this child is doing something and you just don't understand what's going on. What is it? Could it be that their routine is off? I saw the most wonderful, absolutely wonderful meme. And I couldn't put it in the slide. I wish I could have. It was a neat little meme, and it was from an autism mom. And each of the children had a sign, and it said, "Oh, you're upset that your routine has been altered because you can't go outside and hang out with your friends and do things because of social distancing. Guess what it's like to be a child with autism?" And I thought, how wild is that? That's golden. But again, we don't always put ourselves in this example. Honestly, this is one of those silver linings, because people who don't normally get sensory overload or have significant difficulties with certain things, we're learning what it's like to be on the other side right now, which can kind of be a good thing to have that empathy. So I usually ask people, regardless of what they're seeing on the outside, to again look back and think, well, what might be going on the inside that's causing some of these problems? Could it be an endocrine issue? Could it be the person has social anxiety? Could it be that they didn't get a lot of good sleep last night? They came to the board meeting today and they bit your head off, but then it turned out that they didn't sleep last night. They were worried about the presentation, and that's what came out. And it could be any number of things. We don't always know what it is. But if we can be willing to step back for a moment and look at things from the other person's perspective, sometimes that can be really helpful for us. Now, here's another perspective slide. I was able to get this one in there. This is Mr. P, who is a veteran. We think he's a World War II veteran. As of this moment in time, and he is here in the United States, But as of this moment in time, we believe that he is the oldest survivor of having contracted the coronavirus. And
Wow.
he is 104.
Holy cow. Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. So if he can do it, there's hope. I love telling people hope springs eternal. I believe that is true. We're having to adjust our routines right now, and that can cause some anxiety. People that normally are not all in the house at the same time are all in the house at the same time. They're not able to go out as much as they normally would. But this picture offers me hope on a couple of different levels. One, I know there's a lot of fear about, well, what if I did contract this illness? What in the world would happen to me? Well, here's a survivor, and we're hearing more and more and more about survivors in their 80s, in their 90s, now 100, and the other way as well. Some of our younger folks are recovering as well, thank God. And so, I remind myself that there is hope. We do have some savvy scientists who are on the front line, who are working on vaccines. I remind myself that ultimately, again, and this is from a believer perspective, I don't think it's fatalistic at all, but if something were to happen on this side, I know where my eternal home is. I know that things are inevitably going to be okay, and that gives me hope. And this is something that I can use. We've been doing this in our home now as a teaching tool because, as I mentioned before, anxiety can be very rampant. Lots of my patients are coming to me and they're very anxious, and they're more anxious than they normally are. My daughter, I know that she's been a bit more anxious than she normally is. And I will remind her that, first of all, there's nothing new under the sun. We've seen this before. This is the second version. This is the reboot of this virus. And we already had people that were working on a vaccine for the last, honestly, it's about 10 years that people have been working on this vaccine, 10 plus years that people have been working on a vaccine. That God knew that this was going to happen before we knew it was going to happen. And that because he knew about this, he already put it in the hearts and minds of, and gave witty inventions, as the Bible says, witty inventions and thoughts about how people can heal through this and can be well through this. So periodically, if we see that she's getting a little anxious, we'll pull her to the side and we'll just say, look, these are the reasons that we have for hope on earth, but these are also the reasons that we have for hope from an eternal perspective. And I find that is really helpful from an anxiety perspective too.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Now, this, I think, supersedes a lot of things. And as we're going through, I don't know which one of these points I think is my favorite or the more real, if you want to say that. But this is one of the ones that this is a lesson that I learned from my son. A lot of times we are trying to get our children to speak if they're nonverbal, or getting our spouse to speak to us or talk to us on our love language, not necessarily in their language that's the most comfortable for them.
Right.
And this was a neat little lesson that I learned from my son. And it just goes to show us that we can learn their language. And they may or may not learn our language, the King's English or whatever your native language is, as well as you. But they have a language. And we can learn their language. It's not always about making them conform to us. Yes, we want them to be able to express themselves and have conversations or share information with us. But just as much as we're trying to get them to learn the next device or learn the next app or learn the next whatever, we might want to take some time and do that with them. And here's my example. When we started with my son, we started with the good old PEC system, where the picture exchange system, where he would give us a picture for what he wanted, especially food, and eventually he would say, I want, and then would hand us the tablet for whatever it was. And then we got fancy because the speech pathologist says, well, this is a little limiting, and that device isn't, we can't keep getting cards for everything every time his vocabulary expands. So let's move up, and I think we moved up to a tech talk or something else that had the one page that there was the slider that you put in, and then you could record your voice to it. But again, that was limited because it was one page and you have to slide things in and out, and that got cumbersome. So then we got super fancy and got him an iPad, and got the lamp technology that has the base page, I think is 64 or 84 characters, but it can go up to 200 plus characters. And we got to this point, and then what happened? My son was basically trying to press all these buttons and was like too long and pushed the device away and said, "I want candy, please." And I just remember thinking, yay, we
Wow.
made him talk.
Right.
But what it really was is he was just so frustrated with the methods that we were using that he was just like, let me just help these people because they don't have a clue. And now guess what he uses more on occasion than he uses this. We went right back to PECS. And it's not exactly PECS, but it's the equivalent of a visual schedule that's very basic and very similar to PECS. And again, that kind of taught me that in the progression of things, you may try all of these different things to help understand their language, and they may try all of these different things to get you to understand them. It may be behavior, it may be acting out, it may be biting, it may be spitting, it may be pulling hair. But remember that you're partners and you're a team, you're co-laboring. They're learning from you and you're learning from them. We don't want it to ever be so one-sided that we're constantly just giving information to the person with the special need and not getting that reciprocity, because we have so very much to learn about them. I love the way that the Bible says that those who are the weaker vessels, and it's referring also to the softer, more precious metals, silver, gold, in its rarest form, and it's very soft, it's very pliable. But those weaker vessels, it says, are worthy of more honor, even more honor. And we should give them a special place because they are indispensable. And that, I believe, is also how the Lord looks at our children and our spouses and our family members and our friends and coworkers with special needs. They are worthy of that special honor of us to take the time, not just to try to see if we can teach them some things, but also to take the time to learn whatever the lesson is that he wants. The book that you mentioned earlier, that Come to the Table, there's a picture of it at the end. And the reason I put it there is because the book is nothing but questions. Questions. But a lot of the questions came directly from parents and caregivers. But one question that really stuck out to me is, again, we sometimes get that why. Why was my child born this way? Why was my family member born this way? And again, I'm reminded of that verse that says, does the clay or the pot ever say to the potter, why did you make me like this? What were you thinking? No, it just is happy to be used. It just becomes used, and it becomes, again, that vessel for our honor, the vessel that's fit for the master's table. And eventually, if we are patient enough, again, their speech and their language may not be exactly like our speech and our language, but it's understandable enough that we can communicate with them and they can communicate with us. And sometimes it's going to change the way. I can tell you right now, the last time I said, let's go eat dinner, has been a long time. But usually you will hear me say, okay, it's time for eat. Well, that's because I've been saying it so long, because that's how my son talks. And his speech therapist just told me, we're going to have to up-level your conversation. Oh, okay, maybe. We'll see. Point number 4 is that poop happens and it's okay. This is probably hands down my favorite. Right. And I will tell you why. My son has had difficulty with potty training for a while. And he is finally, I think, mastering the poop. But I do remember one morning that we were supposed to be having ABA. I don't know what time of day it was, maybe 9 o'clock in the morning. And at about 8, I didn't hear my son moving, and I went to go find out what he was doing. And he was in the bathroom, and he was covered from head to toe. And I remember thinking, what in the world? I was just like, there's no way in the world we're going to make it to this session by 9, because it's 8 o'clock and he's covered in poo. And I literally just had him put in the shower and just, let the shower run, because what else are you going to do? It was either laugh or cry at that moment. But I remember later on, the lesson that I learned from that was that, poop happens and it's okay. It's going to happen. Not so nice things are going to happen in your life. Your children are going to do things that you're going to find incredibly embarrassing out in front of other people. They're going to say things. Their filters are off or non-existent. They're going to do things, and you're going to be a bit uncomfortable about those things sometimes. But you have to recognize you do the best that you can, and you just kind of go with it. This is a picture of Thomas the Train, and you can't see the rest of it. But Thomas is he is the potty train as we were training my son, and there was a picture of each of the steps so that he knew what to do. And we've eventually gotten to the place where we haven't had those accidents before, but as we were going through them, I was reminded of the story that my grandmother told me, which is that you can look at poop as poop, but you can also look at poop as fertilizer. My grandmother had a garden, an acre garden that she tilled herself. And every year she had like an abundance of fresh produce, that so much so that we were never able to eat it all ourselves. Even though she had 10 children, she always had to share with her neighbors and always wanted to share with her neighbors. But in the process, I remember the fertilizer that she would put down. Oh my gosh, it stank to high heaven, because it was manure. It was cow manure. I didn't know what it was at the time. I just knew it was fertilizer. But when I later learned it was poop, I was like, oh, no wonder it smelled like that. But again, we can look at the poop in our lives, the poopy situations, the poopy circumstances as just that, or we can look at it as opportunities to grow our faith. Yes, it's growing our patience, but it's also growing the other fruits of the Spirit. And I love the way the Bible calls them fruits of the Spirit. And what are fruit? The fruits grow from something. And again, sometimes to have the best fruit, you kind of have to have the stinkiest fertilizer. I no longer like that term challenge or even obstacles. I look at challenges as opportunities, and I look at obstacles as opportunities as well, opportunities for growth. Okay. So I use those terms sometimes, but usually when I'm looking at them, I'm thinking from that. I'm going to take a page from our youngest kids, because, we used to think about poop as this really bad thing, but now even our younger kids, even the teenagers and the young adults, they've glorified poop. When you think about it, they have totally glorified poop. You go into any store that you can think of, especially any pop culture store, and there's going to be a poop emoji somewhere in some form. It's going to be a squeeze toy or a stress ball, or I saw a poop candy the other day, lollipop, and I was just like, okay, that's a bit much for me. But the teenagers have totally embraced this concept of, you know what, poop happens. It's okay. So, they've taken it to another level, but I will say that I can ride with them a little bit on the concept that, yes, there are things that happen in life and we just have to turn them around. One of my favorite poop emojis now is actually the unicorn one. If anybody's seen it, it's the unicorn poo that's rainbow. That again, there's just like this whole culture around it right now where there's a group that's basically saying, we know that bad things are going to happen. Things are going to happen that we don't like. Things are going to happen that are just very difficult for us to deal with. Again, we're thinking about the coronavirus. It's not a pleasant experience, but I am hearing so many stories of hope. I'm hearing so many stories that I'm just like, wow, if this hadn't happened, then this wouldn't happen. If the virus restrictions hadn't happened, there literally are families that would be disconnected right now. I'm seeing families get together around the board game, and they haven't done that in months and ages. I'm seeing people reach out in video conferencing and by phone to people that they haven't talked to in years.
Right.
Recently, I spoke to a pastor that literally, I know we haven't spoken in about 4 years. Things happen, time slips by. But when the poop in our life wakes us up and calls our attention, because when poop happens, you have to pay attention to it, right? Most people can't just ignore it. You have to pay attention to it. But it's something that when it calls our attention, it can do it in a good way, okay? Again, I want you from now on, every time you see poop, I want you to think fertilizer. And our last point is that you are the structure. I say this to myself almost on a daily basis. You are the structure. Times will change. Circumstances will change. Vacation plans will change. You may go on vacation and your entire routine and setup is different. But you have to remember that you are the structure, and your kids, your family members, your spouse, they're going to feed off of you. When they see that you are doing things well and having a decent time, they're going to do things well. We plant a garden every single year. And this is how it starts out. We go and we get a plot. We get these little plats. We fill them with water, open the water up. We fill them with seeds. And then we produce our indoor garden and we transfer it outside. And where we transfer it outside varies from year to year. But this is something that my son, my daughter know that we do. And they're a part of the process from the beginning until the end. and they get to eat the fruit or the vegetables at the end. And it's a really neat thing that we do. But they're a part of this, and we've set it up so there's a structure around it. And they know it's coming. They know when spring comes, we're going to do this gardening project. And they know by the summertime, we're going to have something to eat. And mom's going to try all kinds of new recipes that they may or may not like. But they know it's coming because I've set the structure and they can expect it. We do the exact same thing through our homes right now. We homeschooled last year. The Lord laid on our heart to homeschool last year. We were able to travel. And I was so glad that we did it for two reasons. One, my son was very much in a routine with his school and with his other services. And I was asked to speak at South by Southwest in Austin. And we went to Austin for the entire month. And I initially remember being very fearful and very anxious and very uncomfortable with the idea of going. And he had never been on a flight before, and we were going to drive, and it was just going to be this whole big, huge thing. And I remember saying, you know what? I'm the constant in this. He's going to be in a new home, in a new town, potentially on a flight, on a plane, doing something that he's never done before. And these are a lot of unknowns. Normally we will change one thing at a time, but we were changing about 15 different things at one time. And I had no idea what was going to happen when we landed in Texas, or how we were going to, make it through the airport, because he'd never been in the airport before. We had to go through all those things. But the entire time I kept reminding him, I'm okay, you're okay, we're okay. I'm with you. Dad's with you. Your sissy's with you. And whenever I saw him, his behavior getting a little unusual, or even if I could see any signs of anxiety, I would just repeat that. I'm okay, you're okay, we're okay. We're all together. There's daddy, there's mommy, there's sissy. And the principal people that formed the structure of his life were all there. And that was very helpful for him. So just remembering that you're the structure and continuing routines as best as you can, but doing that in a way that you're also reminding them that, all these other things may change. We ended up being in a different bed and breakfast over the time that we were there in Texas. And again, our room and board changed. Everything that he knew was changing, but he did perfectly well. My daughter, same thing, did perfectly well, because we kept reminding her that we were the structure, that we were the constants. But of course, we were taking our lead from God. We were reminding her, hey, look, even if something were to happen to us, God's never going to leave you. He's never going to forsake you. He's always going to be there. Now that, plus us having homeschooling, where we homeschooled during that period of time, that was honestly a perfect setup for right now. Because when we first got the notice from the school that there weren't going to be classes, and there was going to be the distance learning, I told my daughter that Thursday or Friday, I said, guess what? It's back to homeschool. I said, same routine as before, 9 to 12 is when you're going to be doing your work at the computer. In the afternoon is when we're going to be doing hands-on. So this is actually one of our homeschooling hands-on projects that started before, that we've just continued. And again, that structure of who we are, and them being able to take their lead from us has been helpful for them, I believe. So let's recap. In the process of making sure that you are growing, that your children are growing, and that we're all learning to find joy in the journey, it really is line by line, precept by precept. Remember, it's kind of like that garden that I showed you. We know that cantaloupe seed has the ability to produce beautiful cantaloupes. But if we never plant it, if we never meditate on it, if we never let water and rain fall on it, it's not going to do anything. It's going to stagnate. It's the same thing with the principles that I just shared today. If you can take those principles to heart, they can reveal and give you, I think, a beautiful harvest of joy in your parenting journey. So just to recap again, it's all about your mindset. It begins with your mindset, just kind of shifting things and looking at things from a different perspective. Recognize that the behaviors that you're seeing, the concerns that you're seeing, is starting from the inside out. Could be a source of anxiety. It could be something, physiological that's going on. It could be medications. It could be all kinds of different things. It could be one of the systems that they have in their body that may be working in alignment, but maybe kind of a little bit out of whack because we're somewhat in crisis mode. But being able to move them from crisis to stability by routine and structure can be helpful. Remember that it's not all about teaching them how to behave during this time, but it's also about learning to speak their language, learning to understand what they're saying. Poop does happen and it is okay. Actually, I think it's even more than okay, because great poop makes great fertilizer and it makes great fruit. You are the structure, and you can do this. And I know that you can. So I'm going to open it up to questions. I am going to pop this one slide up so that you can see it. This is the book that I was talking about, the Come to the Table Special Needs devotional, that has those principles and those concerns. I do think, if I'm not mistaken, I have to go back and look, but I'm pretty sure that right now it's available for download on Amazon. If you have Kindle, it's free. I do think that it's free right now. And if it's not, then we'll go and we'll adjust that. But I do believe that it is. If you are interested, I'm sorry.
That's awesome. That's great.
Okay. I'm pretty sure that it is. But if it's not, it will be by the weekend. Sometimes it takes them about 3 days to update. But we will make sure that that's adjusted, because that's my gift. I wanted to make sure that people were able to receive that. On social media, I am almost everywhere as Bergina Isbell MD. So LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And periodically, I try my best to share positive and encouraging things, stories of hope that I find, positive quotes that I find. And then for anyone who's attending today, this is just my gift for SOARs. Doc Hurley doesn't even know about this, but I did know that there were some questions that we had. I'm going to answer them to the best of my ability. But I always tell people, if there's a question you have and I don't know the answer, I know who knows the answer. And I usually have a variety of experts and consultants and really savvy parents that I'm connected to, that I usually will reach out to on others' behalf, and so that we can get the answer. But this is a way that you can get a consult with me if you have a question, or if I don't answer your question today and you want to talk with me further. It literally links you and gets you on the phone with me. The one thing I will ask, it's drbergina.as.me/discovery call. The one thing I will ask is, in the part where it says, what's your concern or what's your question? What would you like Dr. Bergina to respond to? If you could actually fill that part out, that would help. Because again, if it's a question that I just know off the top of my head, wonderful. But I respect your time. And if it's a question that I kind of have to research a little bit, and look at a journal, or again, consult a colleague, I'd like to be prepared with the answer when you call. All right. And that is all.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all that with us. Here, let me get back. Great information with everything and that. We've got, and you kind of hit on several of the questions that had already been brought up previously, and absolutely love everything you shared. We got, one panelist, one of our watchers put in the comments, said that they have no problem with finding joy with our son on the spectrum. In fact, it has been through him that God has shown us the everyday joys of watching the small steps that we could have missed with our other kids. What I struggle with is the attitudes and actions that we deal with our other kids that are 16 and 22. Any pointers on that? So dealing with siblings.
Yes. Siblings can be really tough. And we have the unique perspective, like I said, with my daughter, where for majority of her life, we didn't know there was autism there, and we only dealt with, the sibling of a child with autism, and we just got to see that. And then later on, we got to see, oh, well, gosh, she is on the spectrum. So how do you deal with that? So I'll share from both of those perspectives. So this is actually from my daughter, things that I've learned from her. She's now 17, so that's kind of neat. And I did ask you if there was anything specific. If there's a specific thing that I don't say, then definitely come back and ask. But one of the things that I have noticed, and this just happens as parents, we try, but it happens. I don't think we intentionally are like Rachel, who had Esau and Jacob, and she very clearly favored Jacob, obviously, right? Even to the point of helping him steal his birthright.
Right.
I don't think that we intentionally do that. At least I know I don't intentionally do that. But I will tell you that my son gets the lion's share of almost everything. He gets the lion's share of our finances. He gets the lion's share of our time. He gets the lion's share of a lot of our resources. Why? Because he is incredibly dependent on us because of his intellectual disability and him being nonverbal. He's not able to advocate for himself that often. He's learning to, but it is a challenge. And so because of that, I noticed there was a period of time, I remember my daughter sharing with us through an intermediary, but she was just like, initially it was, well, I don't even know if my parents love me because they don't ever have time for me. They always have time for Amir, but not me. You notice in my slides, they're all pictures of him. It's interesting. I have another panel that has pictures of her with her permission, but most of those are ones from her back or her side because she's not a picture person. And I remember telling her, I said, honey, we love you. I said, we'd love you no less than the way we love our son. But I had to do a lot more affirming with her. And this is one thing that we did early on that I think was somewhat helpful, is that we made sure she was connected to other siblings of other siblings of siblings with special needs. So even right now, she has access to a young adult support group that are basically all kids who have siblings on the spectrum. So they can talk and hash and powwow about all kinds of things. And then she also gets to see from their perspective that, your parents do love you. They do care about you. They're probably just spending time doing this or doing that with them because they have to right now because he's just so dependent on them. One other thing we try to do, we're not perfect at it, but we try something called Kid of the Day. Kid of the Day. And Kid of the Day is something where we will take turns where one day we kind of cater more to one child. What do you want for lunch today? Okay, because y'all want different things and I'm not a short order cook, but Kid of the Day, what do you want for lunch today? You get what you want for lunch. And again, this is more for younger people. For the older ones, again, for her, now that she's 17, she is not as concerned, I think, about Kid of the Day, but her thing is she does want to know that we are proud of her, that we love her, that we affirm her, regardless of what her life choices are, regardless of what she does. It's kind of like no matter what my son does, he could come home with a bean of rice on a piece of paper, and it's like, oh, that's so beautiful.
Right.
Well, she's an artist, but she's also a senior going into art school. And so when we see her art, it's like, oh, well, that's nice, and then we critique it. And then it's kind of like, well, you just said his little piece of rice on a piece of paper was awesome. Like, why are you critiquing my artwork? And so we have to pull back and remind ourselves that, look, we still have to affirm her in her own way. And if we make a big deal about his stuff, we have to make a big deal about her stuff as well. Not that we don't want to, but sometimes we'll fall into that critical pattern because, she's going to be an artist and we want her to understand what it's going to really be like when she gets out in the real world. Independence is definitely an issue. Pam said most of it is just their independence and them thinking that they know everything. And that is true as well. We definitely have that. One thing that I've been modeling a lot lately with them is I don't know. And sometimes it gets a little grating for my daughter, but I've been doing it for a reason. I'll say, well, honey, I don't know the answer to that. I think this is the best way to do it. I think this is how you should do it. These are the lessons that we're teaching you on how to do this. But I don't honestly know the answer to that. Let's go see what God's word says about it. Let's go see, did you do your devotional today? What did your devotional kind of hint at anything that might answer that question? Because I kind of want her, especially because she's leaving. She's a senior in high school. She's leaving for college this year. Because she's leaving, I want to start instilling that teaching that you need to go and look it up yourself and figure it out in God's word. We kind of did that before when she would come to us with questions and be very dependent. We would say, look, go to your favorite search engine and find the answer to that. Don't just rely on me to tell you. Now it's, okay, we need you to go look that up. We were literally having this conversation this morning where she was talking about angels and what angels look like. And she says, I think they look like this. Funny story. She says, well, what do angels look like? And I had this image and I said, well, I remember an image. And I said, and the angel, I said it was just this tall, bald figure with no hair, bald, who, just was kind of had light and just radiated light. And he's like, and she says, so an angel is a skinny supermodel who's bald and glows. I was just like, really? That's what you got out of my teachable moment? And so then I went back to, you know what, you're learning to be independent and you're learning the answers to these questions and you're posing some great answers. I said, but what we need to do, I said, we probably need to do a word study. And I said, and I'll teach you how to do that. I said, but we'll probably need to do word study on angels and just read what the Bible says about angels so we will know what the Bible says about what angels look like. And then she went a little deep on me and she was just like, well, I vaguely remember a Revelation where we was talking about the angel with the 4 wings and the 4 faces. And I was just like, okay, little girl, stop it.
Yeah, I'd also jump on with the independence part and the teens, older teens and early 20s thinking they know everything. The other thing to remind our parents is this is actual medical fact that the frontal lobe for kids doesn't fully mature until they're about 24, 25, 26, somewhere in there. And that's where a lot of that thinking is all occurring. So that's just how they are. And I know so many parents, myself included, I'm there, I'm dealing with this. I've got, an 18-year-old and they do think they know everything, but we try to convince them that we know more. I think we just have to pick our battles with that and realize that if we keep trying to prove that we're right, we're never going to be able to find the joy with it. And so that's the important thing. Again, it's that whole perspective thing. And just pray that God protects them, help them not to do anything stupid until their frontal lobe actually matures and they then get the maturity and wisdom that they need. But that's an actual part with that. We've got, and one of these you kind of had talked on, but one little bit more specific. One question we've got is, would you recommend Zoom social meetings for older children with developmental disorders or differences? And if so, should hosts seek professional advice on how to facilitate such meetings?
Great question. And I think that the short answer is yes. Short answer is yes. I think that video conferencing meetings can be incredibly helpful, especially right now so they can see other people socially. My son just got on a little group meeting the other day. And it was really neat to see that when he got on, we've been trying to get him to be friendly, say hi, maintain eye contact and say hi. And he'll be like, hi, hi, hi. When he got on that Zoom meeting with those other peers and the peers were in there and they were like, hi, hi, hi. Guess what he did? Hi. So kids will mimic that behavior and they'll mimic that age appropriate behavior and that socially acceptable behavior. So I actually really like the video conferencing. Personally, I also like Zoom because it's encrypted. If you look in the top left-hand corner of our little meeting right now, there's a little green lock that's got the little E in it. That means it's encrypted. So unless someone else has this particular meeting ID, and in some cases, they also have to have a password along with the ID, they're not getting in here, which means that it's fairly safe for them. I know there are a couple of other social media apps and chat apps that are not as safe. And there's actually even some concerns about a couple that have come up within the last couple of weeks about being hacking and having their personal information hacked. I'm not as comfortable with those. So again, I like the Zoom. If you want that extra layer of protection when you have your meeting and you host your meeting, using the password or the additional ID can definitely be helpful. For kids, of course, I like it when an adult can be somewhere around. Again, when we were on that little meeting on Wednesday, I thought it was really helpful because literally every child had a parent that was doing something different. Because my son needed the most, out of all of the kids, needed the most attention and guidance, I was sitting right next to him. So you saw the two of us on camera together. There was another young man who you could tell he was very, very independent. His parent was not even physically in the room with him, but you could hear the parent periodically from the other room saying something when he had a question and he didn't know how to answer it or ask it you could hear the parent say, ask da 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 da, and she was guiding from the other room. And then there was one other child who you couldn't see the parent, but you knew they were right there. You saw their legs on screen. They were physically in the room with the child, and they were sitting there, but the child was just all over the room and was very, 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 very verbal and very independent. So again, depending on the age of the child, I just recommend that whoever's facilitating the meeting will ask them to make sure that the parent is somewhere within earshot. If they're not physically in the room, again, that older child that I was talking about was an older child. He looked like he was about 12 or 13. And so he obviously fairly independent from an age perspective. And so the mom gave him that dependence and was in a different room, but she was within earshot. So if something happened, if he started taking his clothes off on camera, if he threw the camera against the wall or threw the iPad or whatever, the parent could hear it and could come and offer aid.
Yeah. And I know our church, our adult class has been doing a Zoom class for the adults and the older teens. And that's been a great time where they can still get together and talk and that. So those are great opportunities for our individuals. The other thing too to remember, our kids, they love routine. And this whole stay at home is just disrupting their routine. So, they're having a hard time with that. But there's other things that we can do with the Zoom and things like that. If you've got a child who requires speech therapy, for instance, you can still have that speech therapy and do it through Zoom. I know several therapists who are trying to continue that. You can do several of your therapy sessions and all that. So you can continue to allow your child to still get the therapy they need and make grounds with that. So those are all great ways to remember that and think through everything. But, we're coming up on the end of our time here today. And, Dr. Bergina, I just want to thank you so much for joining us. It's been great. The biggest thing I want to just reemphasize what you said again is, like I said at the beginning, perspective. And when we're parenting, we really need to change our perspective. And I love what you said, about the poop. We all have poop in our life. Every parent has a poop story. I've got a poop story with my son with that. But we also have that poop that happens in our life. And we've got to change our focus from, oh, how horrible this is, to let's focus on how we can get through it, how we can clean it up, and become better with it. I know I can speak for myself. I've had multiple opportunities through the last 15 years where I've had one thing after another, and every single one of them have been terribly painful, but they've all been wonderful because they've allowed me to get to where I am today. And it's just the perspective that you got to look at, and that poop really can be the fertilizer in your life. So, and then again, the last thing with that is that, we need to try to find that joy in our kids and remember that God's blessed us with them, that each child is fearfully and wonderfully made. And no matter what diagnosis they have, no matter what their intellect is, God created them on purpose for a purpose. And they've got great future ahead of them. SOAR, we're here to assist you as families. SOAR here, we're going to answer the three main questions that every family has. Will my child ever be able to provide for themselves? Who's going to take care of my child once I'm gone? And then who's going to take care of me as a parent? And SOAR is going to be answering those questions with our current and future programming. We're going to be doing some advocacy, get things going for families. We're looking at starting up some parenting support groups. Maybe if anyone's interested in that, you can contact us and help us get those going. But we're going to continue all of our talks. Next week's talk is Talk with Doc is going to be disability ministry. What will summer be? As we're coming up on summer, coronavirus, unfortunately, I think is still going to be here. And I know a lot of churches are starting to really consider now after Easter, okay, what is summer program going to be? Are we going to have the vacation Bible schools? Are we going to do the camps? Are we going to do what? And so I'm going to have a panel of about 5 or 6 disability ministry leaders from all over the country. We're going to talk through options and what we can do and just help brainstorm through that, because the last thing anyone wants is just let our kids have the entire summer off. And we want to help them through that. And I know, there are many camps and many areas that have already canceled. So we'll talk through how we can help with that. And then lastly, if you'd like to help offset the cost of these webinars and help us continue that, you can do that by going to soarspecialneeds.com/donate and help us with that. Again, I'd encourage everyone to go to Amazon and check out Dr. Bergina's book. Again, as she said, she's sharing a free download with us, which is awesome. But also, I'd encourage you to take advantage of the consults that she shared with us. And if you got any questions, if we didn't get to that, get it with her. She's an amazing wealth of information and just a huge blessing to be here with us today. So, Dr. Bergina, again, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been our pleasure.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I hope it was helpful.
Absolutely. It's been very helpful. And we'll be getting this up on our YouTube page and on our website as well as Facebook here shortly. So with that, we'll thank everyone and hope you all have a great week and stay healthy. All right. Have a good day, everyone.